Hello, this is Lisa Lee, and welcome to this week's enrichment reading. We are getting into a topic that I'm super excited about because we're looking at this notion of a home god or a home goddess. And I've been seeing like what that means all week in visions, but I have no idea how it's going to translate into words. And so I'm gonna do my best, and I'm working with the energy of Lugh, and Lugh is an ancient god, and the energy of Lugh as an ancient god is Lugh is the shining one. Lugh is the god of justice, war, craftsmen, skills, trade, harvests. I'm seeing a lot at once, but if you look up Lugh, this is definitely one of my ancestral gods. I do have trouble translating the words with Lugh. I am looking at symbols, and usually like the words will come like very quickly, very easily, like almost like it's a stream basically. And with Lugh, it's a different, my brain reacts differently to the presence of Lugh's energy as a god, because Lugh as a god, and this is interesting and kind of cool, has a different like humanoid phenotype. Like that sounds totally bonkers, but for the purpose of like explaining what it means to channel Lugh, the words are, the complexity with words is a little bit mucky. So I might say a word like harvest but mean field for that, you know, so it might come through just a little bit funny. I noticed with the last time I was listening to the channeling that like it does, like words kind of flip-flop with me in a way that's interesting. So we'll find out more about that. But when we talk about what it is to have a home god, it's about having a type of relationship with one god where that's your god. And I'm gonna try and get this more perfect, because you are meant to understand yourself through the lens of the deities in the way that, let me get a couple more cards, because I'm going to try and, wow, look at these two cards coming out together. Do you see this? This is Apocalypse and the Destroyer. Bottom of the deck is the Shapeshifter. Let's get a little bit more, like, I see where this is going, like, in terms of the landscape, but Lugh is bringing us, like, to a different place than I was expecting to be, so we're gonna let Lugh lead, actually. So the healer here at the bottom of the deck, and the offering, and the, okay, that's cool. Okay, this notion of a home god is actually, like, it's something that, I'm now like amazed with what I'm seeing. Completely amazed with what I'm seeing. I've been seeing visions all week. This is new, so just give me a second to orient around what Lugh is showing me, because this is an entry point that I hadn't anticipated. Okay, so just take a moment. All right, let's get some, like, I want to get some tarot cards. This is a little bit like adventurous suddenly. We're gonna let the cards come out and see where Lugh is going with us. So the notion of a home god is almost like a family. He's showing me like he's showing me like these little, they look like huts to me, but he's showing me villages. He's showing me his antiquity, and he's showing me all the different species of human, and he's showing me all the different tribes and the kind of world that he was a god over and also grew up through. So he's showing me the archetypal structure, and he's showing me the lifespan of a god and the lifespans of a god, and that just like you have a lifespan where you're an infinite being and you will exist for all of eternity, but you also have a start and a finish of the lifespan that you're living, that is the experience that you're having. So he's showing me that he even grew up in this other world that was like this, and in that world, in your hut with your family, you had a family god, you had a home god, and it was the same spirit that was your home. And so let's keep on going. And he's showing me the different houses, and he's saying to me to tell you, or to show you, to think about this very interesting concept of the spirit of a place, or the spirit of a space, or the spirit of your body. And we spoke about this like briefly when we talked about when you're sitting in a room and somebody walks in and you look up and you turn and you see them, you feel them before you see them. That's the space, that's the energy, that's someone's essence, that's the essence of another. universe, really. And then when you, and he's also showing me, you know, this example of when you go to Ireland to visit, or you go to Greece to visit, or you go to Spain to visit, each area that you go, even within the United States, when you go to California or when you go to New York, when you step on that land, there is a feeling associated with that place that is like a presence. It's a feeling that you're like, oh, that feels like, or even like he's showing me the beach feels like the beach, the desert feels like the desert. This is a primal worldview. These things are alive. They have their own essence. They have their own being. And we participate with all of that as coming into ourselves. And so he's showing me with individual houses that your house feels a certain way, but if you go to somebody else's house, it feels a different way. And if you go to somebody else's house, it feels another way. And if you go to a hotel, it feels another way. That the spirit and the energy of a place, this notion of home God, is the God that was your home. And so but he's saying that there's a lot of layers to this, and we're going to get to all of the layers to that. So let's get some cards out, because I'm liking where this is starting off. And given the backdrop of where we're going, like, whoa, what a cool reading we're getting into. I really like the energy of Lugh. I really like this notion of so in visions, it's always hard for me to make sense of the like antiquity, the ancient stuff, because it all looks really different in visions. And I can see why people get kind of scared when they're looking at like the ancient world, because the ancient world, people were channeling a lot more in the way of like animals. And I don't know if you've ever seen, there are tribes that exist that are like so connected to the earth, so completely connected to the earth, and not as connected to the sky, where you see people who are hunters and gatherers who hunt, and they channel the wolf, or they'll channel the eagle in order to see like where the buffalo is, or you know, whatever they're hunting. They channel animals, and when you're channeling animals, it's a different like look, and it's a different orientation, it's a different way of like being in the world, and it's a different energy altogether. And so if you're used to being in our worldview, and you're used to seeing humans the way that humans react, we channel each other, and we channel the deity plane, and we channel stories and archetypes, and we also channel sky gods, essentially. Like we're like this interesting hybrid. And it wasn't always like that, you know. And so we do tend to be afraid of animals for some reason, and there's some tension there. And so Lugh is saying that like the ancient humans were much closer to their mother than we are, and that's part of the natural evolution of what the being that we are within the being of is. But so we can't take the primal worldview all the way in quite the same way that we did. But there's something here I'm kind of losing. So I'm gonna let some of these cards come out so I can kind of speak more clearly. It's all very interesting, actually. Wow, look at these cards. There's cards that have flipped, so I'm gonna actually take them because this deck is beautiful. It's brand new, and I wish I could give it like an amazing review, because it feels good, which means that those that created it did it right. But because it's because I worked with my tools so intensely, I want them to make a version of it that is just a tiny bit smaller, so it's easier to hold and shuffle. So let's go ahead and not care about that. Let me just go over here and move these cards over. This is interesting, the way that he's having me build the spread. So this is representative of the self. The Devil, the Three of Cups, and the Girl of Cups. There's a lot going on here, actually. So how do you even trust a God, even to this notion of like what we understand as evil is Lugh is kind of saying like we have to work with our notion of good and evil and duality, because there's something here with this Nine of Wands. I'm actually going to take more time to get us even more cards, because I don't totally understand that right there. Okay. So Lugh's gonna help. He's going to help bring us into some clarity. So this concept of like what we are, who we are, what we're created for, and how we're meant to relate to the gods, what I'm seeing in front of me is that we don't know how. We have such a broken, fractured, this is going to be a false God. This apocalypse and this destroyer is speaking of a false God. And I'm going to explain what that is better, if I can get it better, just a slightly clearer picture. So when we're shown the God of a home, and when we're shown the God of a place, and we're shown the God of a space, Lugh was saying the home gods travel within you. Your womb world is like all the traits that make up who you are, and all of the lineages that are. He's showing me roads, and he's showing me like a giant map of the world, really. And he's showing me all these roads, and these roads are like spider webs, and the way in which we are forming and informing the whole, and the evolution of each is informing the whole. And so he's showing me that the gods never go away. The God of a space, he's showing me this hut. And he's showing me this hut in the middle of the woods, and there's a tribe living in it, and that tribe is its own essence of that place, and that tribe feels completely like that place, and that tribe channels the animal of that place, and it is very much its mother, and it's very much in tune with every aspect of its mother, and when the trees rattle, it hears that language and understands it completely. Telepathy is like comprehensive. There's a constant communication, so much so that there is no sense of individual. There's no sense of the individual whatsoever. And if I were to show you the faces of the people in this tribe, they look so much more like animals than people. They look so much more like creatures than what I consider a person. And so Lugh is saying that those gods never go away, that we are informing what they become by way of our consciousness. And so that tribe that has that very unique expression, that all of the creatures have the look of all of the creatures, that what is evolving there like is pulsating with the emanation of that space, and the God that creates and co-creates with the earth to, like, it's like the sun is the inspiration, right? That's an external aspect that is co-creating with the earth, that is creating all of these creatures that look like their mother and their father combined. And their father is the consciousness that comes of this union in those creatures that are made of it. And now he's showing me the map of the world, and it is a huge map, and it is all these interconnections, and it's the way in which those little seeds, those little villages of this very like I want to say pure essence, but not pure like pure is some kind of exalted substance. I'm saying pure essence, like when we're working with alchemy and we're talking about what I'm looking at. Now those are expanding, and when those expand and they meet other essences, they form this kaleidoscopic situation where each individual is now a like cacophony of energies that have to come into a coherence and be integrated together into one, in one way or another. And that doesn't drown them out or erase them. It means that they become more than themselves. And so when it comes to like home gods, that essence was what is created. It's like creation. Once it's created, it's never destroyed. That essence is very much alive within you. Those energies of that tribe and of that place operates through you in a number of innumerable ways, including the nose on your face. That's that creature's nose from that creature's place that you carry on your face, even though it's now a part of a much bigger picture of features that include features from that other place and that other space. And so we're meant to have this intimacy with self and this appreciation of what we are in relationship to creation and the gods that inform our expression, where they're very much alive, very much within us, and very much nothing to be afraid of, because it's your own aspects, your own essences. What does it mean to have that intimacy with self, and what does it mean to then have a relationship with that energy of Lugh that you then pray to? And it's not just the energy of Lugh. You can pick an energy that is your home, that feels like home. And so many of us were raised in the energy of the war god, which means that might be what feels like home. And so like to understand like how the stories inform the essences, like that's where we're going with this reading eventually, but we want to really start. Louis kind of saying, like, pull that back. He sees me like jumping in a direction. No. You know, what it means to know our home gods is to first know ourselves. Once we know ourselves, we can find our way home. Once we find that essence within ourselves that we recognize, then we can recognize it outside of ourselves, but we first have to recognize it within ourselves. So let me get a couple more cards, because this is a great channel. This is beautiful. So he's showing me back to this notion of channeling animals. And it does look scary to me, actually. It looks like a little bit like, like, you know, but like what he's showing me is that how did we come to know what gods are? How did we come to know the gods? Like how did this development, you know, occur? And he's showing me, and yes, the primal worldview is what I'm seeing as an expression of soul. But something like anger, when they were out discovering themselves in relationship to their mother, which was the jungle that they found themselves born into, our ancestors were doing different things and creating different ways to survive. And that survival, there was provision and there was abundance, but that survival was about a creativity and a curiosity and a playfulness and seeking, you know, investigating and tinkering. Like it was this beautiful, and you were informed by the mother as your inspiration. And I'm being shown that instinct, where the animal has a baby and knows immediately what to do with it, is the same thing as intuition, but that our intuition has been, that's where our communication with our with the mother in this way is broken. That telepathy is essentially instinct and a relationship with the divine mother. And so like we had a much more comprehensive relationship with instinct. It was much more instantaneous to learn how to make fire, because her influence was at the ready. That inspiration was like never far. And so there was almost no language, but there was also like a blanket of language that it was always operating at all times. And so how they came to know the gods was when they were out in the woods and they saw a wolf, and the wolf was growling. They saw the wolf growling and they recognized what the growl was. They knew what that growl meant, because they too growled. When they are in the hut and they are angry at the other person in the hut, and they're trying to have an argument about something. This is kind of pre-language. I'm not saying we didn't have language. They had a unbelievable language. So we're not saying that we've gotten better. I'm almost saying we've gotten worse. But their expressions were different. Their expressions were telepathy and like expressions of the body. So like you would be having an argument telepathically, but the expression of the body would be a growl. And we know when we're yelling at something that that's a growl, right? So when they were in the forest and a wolf would growl, they knew that was anger, and they knew that anger was a god, because it existed within them and it existed outside of them. It had existed before they were born and it existed after they were born. And so that's how they identified the gods. It was within them and it was also outside of them. Now, what it means to have relationships with those energies, like this is what we're learning to do, because it's not something that we necessarily do with language. This is so cool. Hold on, I'm just gonna take a breath. Wow. Let's keep going. I just lost the sun. Lugh is represented by the sun card. So this is just his way of like helping me be like, he's like, I'm right here. I'm right here. So when it comes to having a relationship with God, when it comes to having a relationship with Goddess, we first have to know ourselves to know God outside of ourselves. And that's how we truly connect to what is actually divinity, and not a story about divinity designed to redirect us toward disempowerment that siphons those powers, those powers that are literally God and Goddess given into systems and of oppression. The way that we avoid that, the way that we connect with a true God instead of a false God, is not by a story, because that's how you can be manipulated. That's how you can be convinced outside of your own, so there's something to this. So let's take a look with that King of Wands. So this Moon card here, these are the cards of this week that I've been having. So this is going to be really interesting to get into this. Okay, let's get into it. let me start with the cards, because I'm veering all the channel is coming through so fast. I'm not even I'm not like fully connecting with the cards. So let me just move these over so that I can see where they go, and then we can begin. All right. How's the frame? Are we crooked? We're okay. So with the Apocalypse, the 7 of Coins being toil, and the 4 of Wands being coming into a completion. How do we open to the divine genius in a way that is safe? How do we know that the energy that we are channeling is in our highest good, or is it an energy that is there to deceive us and to pull us into peril? Because we live in an ecosystem, and it is very clear to me, and it has been clear to me since I was an itty bitty baby girl with like a bizarre, like way of perceiving the world, that the 4th dimension, when we interact with in the way of a 4th dimension, this is the 3rd dimension. We're in the 3rd dimension, touch, feel, smell, right? The 4th dimension is right above us, and right below us is a 2 dimension. When you look at two dimensions, how do I put this? Because it's so hard to explain because I'm looking at physics. Every dimension exists with the shadow of the dimension that is right above it. So we are the shadow of the 4th dimension. Our experience, this is so hard to explain, it's going to kill me, but I'm seeing it here with the Apocalypse. When you look at your shadow, and when your shadow falls on the sidewalk or on the pavement, there's this long, huge, gigantic shadow from where you're standing that falls and that exists in the 2nd dimension, that is overlaid over the 2nd dimension, that the 2nd dimension is interacting with your shadow as if it takes up an enormous amount of space and makes that space suddenly dark. So everything on the 2nd dimension is interacting with your shadow as if as that shadow is participating with the life of the 2nd dimension by coloring that whole area dark. The 4th dimension, we exist within the shadow of that 4th dimension. This is like very, very true. And the 4th dimension is going to be the underworld. In a certain kind of way, it's the underworld. It's the dimension between, it's the underworld. I don't know how else to explain it. And our understanding of the underworld is limited by a war god story. And I don't know how to get into the war god stuff because it's such a big deal. And every time I go in there, like, we get lost in there, and I don't really want to do that. But to understand what it means to be, dealing with a 4th dimension. Yeah, this is hard to explain. It's really tough. The 4th dimension is the underworld, but the underworld is not just a lake of fire where people are burning. The underworld is not just a place where there are spirits lost and upset and needing guidance. The 4th dimension is kind of not just heaven, not just hell, but also heaven. The 4th dimension also includes, like, it's basically the unconscious mind. It includes all of the created spaces that our ancestors made in their concept of heaven. And if you look at, like, say, Greek mythology, the underworld had like regions that were like these areas of paradise, and then had regions of these areas of suffering, and you were placed within your afterlife based on what work you did on yourself during your life that allowed you to be either miserable about the condition of this next dimension, or like absolutely working in harmony and paradise with what it means to be beyond the body, because this is the dimension of the body. And so those that are attached to ego, those that are attached to the body, those that are attached to energies that interact with the body in a way that are about controlling the space that we're in, they get stuck in like a really nasty kind of 4th dimensional place. But there are also our ancestors and our guardian angels that interact with us through this space too. So that 4th dimension is going to be this system of oppression that upholds and informs the system of oppression that we find ourselves under the tyranny of. And it's also, so it's like very much like this destroyer energy is about destroying that infrastructure in order to have a relationship with divinity that is real, in order to sort of overcome the counterfeit. The counterfeit is the story that we're told about God. What's the story that we're told about God? What is omnipotent that has power over you? What is represented with this devil card? What has control over humanity? What has control over the divine feminine aspect of God, which is the aspect of God in everyone that is receptive and creative? So we do have to kind of go to war with a false god in the form of the shadow aspect of the god of this world. And we know that there is a shadow aspect of the god of this world. And we know that the ruler of this world is that shadow aspect of that god. Because we see wars, because we see genocide, because we see poverty, because we see subjugation, because we see pillaging, and we see rape, and we see colonizing, and we see conflicts between ideologies and forms of people holding energies of supremacy. There's only two ways that those worshiping and adoring a war god, like, there's only two directions with that. And it's like, people go to war because they want paradise, because they want to take those women and those riches for themselves, because they want to have power and dominion over the land, and then they want to hold the land and they want to control it like kings. That's why people went to war. And so that's one outcome of a war. Like that one group rules in glory forever and ever, while the other suffers eternally because they're not in alignment with the winning team. That's an ideology. That's a worldview. And people who participate with this are participating with that energy. The problem with that right now, at the time and the place that we are in, at the evolution of the whole that we find ourselves in, is that we are moving into a level of enlightenment where war is not going to be necessary. And there are people who are saying war will always be necessary because the neighbors are going to want my stuff, and it's like, this is, as long as there has ever been anything, there's war. Look at animals, they eat each other. Like, we are entering the age of Aquarius. The humanoids that we are going to transform into a different form in the same way that the humans that Lugh was have transformed into a different form. This is part of it is an evolution of the whole at a spiritual level. And it is scary for people who are so attached to the story to consider the cosmos. To consider that as above, so as within, so without. The ecosystem that is the whole. So there's something here to what we're talking about in the way of a future where war is unnecessary, because we've been able to create into a space of need and want and competition, so much so that we have coherence. We have a type of economy that is like taking into account all of the resources and taking care of things in indigenous economic. There's a book. It's called. I'm seeing the book cover. Indigenous Economics. I think it's called Indigenous Economics. I think it's even brand new. So I'm seeing that book, and so it's like whatever that economic system is. Someone should look it up and read about it. I haven't read the book. I don't know. I'm seeing it though. I'm seeing the title. I must have seen something because it wouldn't come through otherwise. But it's a different type of economics that takes into account that we absolutely can, with the creative, divine genius, make a harmony for Earth and humanity. We can create an abundance that makes war not necessary. So then what happens to the war god when war is not necessary? What happens to competition when competition isn't necessary? When people are talking about, the kingdom of heaven on earth, the kingdom of heaven on earth, well, first we have to annihilate the planet and everybody on it, and then move to another place where the kingdom of heaven is separate from where we are, or then it comes down and takes over where we are. Well, fine, sure, we can go with that. That's fine. We don't have to argue with it. The kingdom of heaven on earth is a place where war is not necessary. So what comes of these energies of competition? What comes of these energies of violence when there is no need for it? They no longer exist. We're no longer channeling through those energies into the world as we express ourselves. So we are at this apocalypse of toil and hierarchy and the incoherence of competition and violence. We are entering into a place with an intimacy with self where we notice our own divinity and the divinity in others, where we're understanding the alchemy of what it is to have been created as part of an ecosystem within a whole. We are becoming more conscious of each other, and we're not wiping each other out in competition. It's not this group is in control of that group, and now this group has to assimilate under that group, and now we all look like that group, and now we're in accordance with the war god's favorite. That's incoherent. That is incoherent when you look at the long arm of history. That is incoherent when you interact on a face-to-face basis with other peoples of other lands, of other belief systems. It is incoherent to think that that is true. There is a bigger picture that needs to be sublimated, apocalypse, destroyed, in order for you to have access to your own divinity and the divinity that informs your divinity and the divinity that is the whole, the one that we are a part of within the body of. You are one central intelligence. You are a single being, but within you are planes of existence with mitochondria, with cells, beings that make you you. You are one, but you are many. You are organs. You are many and you are one. God is many and God is one. And so it is incoherent to be tribal in respect to conquering and assimilating, because it doesn't work to have that kind of conflict. And so when we think about this completion of toil, this completion of having to beg for your survival with the labor of your mercenary sweat of your brow, where you're serving a kingship, whether that kingship is some tyrannical king or the kingship is an empire of business tycoons and with their, it's so gross when I look at what is considered the kings of the land, when I look at the way that wealth represents and that power represents, I get so nauseous. And I'm interrupting the whole channel to show you that when like Lugh just showed me like these business titans that are, appoint themselves kings, like there's nothing uglier than what they're doing with the resources of the land. Like nothing is uglier. And so that God, that false God that subjugates, that has no creative capacity for making a world where we are no longer like, so Lugh is basically trying to get me to calm down because I'm really angry. I'm getting like furious because I'm seeing how beautiful this world could be. I'm seeing what we can create with faith, agreement, and reality. I'm seeing what can be done with removing the counterfeits of what is not divinity, what is not God, and co-creating with the divinity that is within the whole, that is varied. And how we recognize our gods, our ancestral gods, is in knowing ourselves and knowing those expressions of divinity, of our holy of holies, that is in alignment with a place and a space and a God that was developed, that our ancestors in their little clusters were in such relationship with, that their instinct told them how to take a baby out of their body and how to take care of it. They gave birth alone in the jungle. They knew what they were doing. Why? How? That was that mother. That was that divine like parentage. And so when we talk about a home God, we talk about the divine parentage, and we talk about the fact that the divine parentage is there to provide for all of your needs, because that is the design of creation. Born in this jungle, knowing how to take the baby out and what to do with it, being able to communicate with those aspects of everything around you in order to sustain the life. It was all given to you. It was all there, including this relationship with divinity that informed your instincts, that still inform your instincts, but inform your instincts at a whisper instead of what was a roar. And so how do we get back into that relationship with the divine genius, that inspiration, that instinct, bringing in God into the world through that, via that, channeling that through yourself? How do you even get near it? Well, we actually have to do away with the concept of God that is so alien to what God actually is. And so this destroyer here with this 9 of Wands and this Ace of Swords and this 3 of Swords and this Queen of Wands, The Nine of Wands is being at a breaking point. It is the individual person who has so much to carry, so much that is on their back, day in and day out, that they are hollowed out by the process of providing the basic necessities, and it's still not enough, and it's just enough, and there's some relief here and there's some relief there, and that relief is good and that relief is bad, and there's guilt and there's shame and there's aspiration and there's there's so much going on here, around this notion of like what God is. And really what God is the part of you that informs you how to take care of the infant that just came out of your body while you're sitting in the jungle. It is the part of you that shows you what it is to hunt for food when there's a famine and you're hungry. It's the part of you that calls you to a place and a time and an encounter that puts you in orbit with your spouse or your love. There's all stuff going on here that is influencing you in a myriad of ways. And so, like, to get rid of a story that isolates you and puts a level of responsibility on you, and that is designed to control you and designed to extort your life, to take your life and force you to give it in exchange for basic necessities while you fight for it. That's the mercenary. That's the soldier. That feeling of God's presence, with that God, that feeling of that God's presence it's not nothing. It's powerful. How do I explain this? So there's a feeling, like, back to this notion of like, what are we channeling? What are we holding? What are we bringing into the world? The notion of a false god, like, let's talk about it, because so much of what we deal with when we enter into arenas of spirituality that aren't in compliance with the war god is all the demonization, all of the you look at everything that isn't in accordance with that belief system, and you have propaganda around like everyone else's gods are evil and no good, and if you are interacting with your own gods or the gods of your ancestors or the gods of where you came from or your god that you were born with in another country with another name, that you are now like evil. And that totally got me off track, because that's exactly the problem. All of those considerations, all of that fear around what it is to interact with divinity is nonsense. That's the false god. That's a lie. Because hundreds of thousands of millions of years, God has been informing humanity on how to survive in environments with stories that came from the point of intuition around the bonfire. Think about the fire and the oral storytelling. And the oral storytelling that led to stories like Job, and the oral storytelling that led to stories like everything that exists in the way of scripture or mythology started because it was coming through an inspiration. Someone was channeling it through either their experience or the experience that they heard about another. And then other people were identifying with this story, with this structure, and saying, I see that within me. I see that within my experience. And I know how to find God within my experience because I heard about how you find God in that experience because the story was given to me and I was able to have that access. It's a vehicle of faith. The placebo pill heals because someone believes it does. That means it's the belief that has the power, and the story, the container, is facilitating it. And so when we understand that, and we understand what it is to actually connect with God, to actually connect it with God is not to take a story from outside of ourselves and force it over, like this is now the only story and the only way. It's to recognize these stories about God and where God operates within these stories about God, and recognize what it feels like when we experience that essence within ourselves, and then bring that essence within ourselves out into the world. The shadow aspect of the war god is the tyrannical, lunatic, pillaging, colonizing, supremacist, my way or the highway energy. Competitive sports team, that's the shadow aspect of the war god. And I'm not saying sports team is like shadow, but I'm saying it's like that rallying cry and that energy when it comes to taking the lives of others. We like it in sports, we don't like it in war. because of the stakes, but it's the same thing, right? So the shadow aspect is always going to be the destructive aspect, and so the destructive aspect of the war god, people can enter in and they can express it and they can channel it through the world, and they can channel it into the world, and they can channel that power of violence and the war cry into the world and aim it at everybody, and it has a certain kind of power, and it can even be sort of kind of enjoyable in the same way that like rooting for a team that's winning is kind of enjoyable. But that's just one aspect. That's just one God. And that's that God's shadow aspect at that. That's not even that God's elevated aspect. That God doesn't love you at the shadow aspect. That God loves you at the elevated aspect. And the elevated aspect is advocacy. The elevated aspect is a type of leadership related to creativity. It's justice in the light aspect. And so how we choose to participate with the gods has a lot to do with where we are, who we are, and what we're choosing to channel through in the form of what they are and who they are. And so in the absence of war, when we don't need war, the moment we don't need war, that energy, that rallying cry, that like intense, like we're gonna win because that becomes about sports and innovation in the light attribute. And it ceases to ever be war and violence ever again. And so it's like we can still have these energies in a relationship with these energies that is positive and good. There's a way to relate to the war god that is incredible. And rowing a boat, you know, and in the Olympics and winning, that's a really good way of relating to the war god and channeling that god and worshiping that god with your being. But a really bad way to relate to that god is an ends justify the means, mowing down an entire neighborhood because you're right and they're wrong. Because you have a fence and they want to get over it because they're hungry and you're not. That's like absolutely not the right way. That's the devil. That's the devil right there. And so, you know, when it comes to finding your home God, you know, you're interacting with all kinds of energies, all kinds of God. And the moon card, this is the moon card here. And the moon card here was a really interesting experience that I had this week. And I think we can talk about it here with the Queen of Swords and the Sun. But before we do that, you know, in order to put down the burden of being a mercenary, I was talking to somebody this week about what it means to channel the war god, what it means to invoke the war god, asking the war god into your heart, asking the war god, your will, not mine, giving the war god your being, and serving that war god. Everybody can serve and love the god that they love. That's cool. That god loves you back. Everybody's god who they serve loves them back. That's how it works. But people who do choose that god, and that's where they're going with it, their minds operate with that god. They come into well, that god is operating through them. And so the war god does this thing. The war god judges, right? Because in the light attribute, the war god is justice. But the war god very naturally assesses by way of judgment, looks around at all the archetypes, all the people around, making judgments. Looking around at the environment, always kind of judging. Where am I? Where is everybody? Is everybody safe? It's the war god's mind. So the war god's mind is first judging. Then the war god's mind is assessing. And then and in that assessment, coming to a position on what needs to be defended, what needs not to be defended, who's right, who's wrong, who's in rank where. And then it's either assimilating, bringing what's around them in and being comfortable with and feeling that it's a controlled environment and they're fine, or defending against it because it's not fine for whatever reason that their judgment has, you know, made. And then like that, this is like the way, so judgment, and then it's either assimilate or defend against, and then back to judgment, and it's like a wheel, and that's always what's happening. So that's the magic of that energy, and that's the magic at work from that energy around the person and through the person and in that person's mind, always trying to figure this stuff out. It's like it's a constant helicopter, you know, kind of going over. That's what it is to be so close to that God and have that God be you in the world. And is that God terrible? No, you're operating with it and through it, and you're bringing beautiful stuff through it if you're doing it right. But if you're doing it wrong, and if you're not having a healthy, conscious relationship with that God is going to eat your life, and you will be a mercenary with nothing to show for it, because that God's reward system is hierarchical, which means you're going to have to work a lot harder because it's exchange based. And so you can love that God and worship that God when you have to go to war, and it is going to be a winning situation. You are channeling the right energies. But that energy doesn't do well in relationship at home a lot of the time, because you need to be channeling a different energy in an intimate relationship in order to make that intimate relationship not also feel like a battlefield. And so to understand the alchemy of how we work with divinity and how divinity works through us, it's to understand that that kaleidoscope of essences can't be distilled down into the shadow aspect of a tyrannical war god. We're supposed to enter into that energy where we are. And then we're supposed to use that aspect of soul, that aspect that is connected to where we are from, our own like divinity, recognize our own divinity, and now we bring our own divinity, our own refined divinity, to whatever situation we're in, whatever archetypal story we find ourselves in. That's sovereignty. But to get to that sovereignty and to really understand what it means, we have to like destroy this notion of being at battle and being the wounded warrior all the time. And we have to find a version of the truth that helps us mend our broken hearts and connect to our passion, our feeling alive, our feeling vibrant, not just when we're on the war battlefield, not just when we're pillaging in one way or another, in all the forms that pillaging happens, not just when we're in strategy. You know, this Queen of Wands speaks to strategy, and yeah, that's what it was. I couldn't get it right, and I'm gonna the war god's mind is judgment, assessment, strategy, either assimilation or defense, and you can operate on that wheel and lose your entire life and become that. And where else are you? To step into another place is to recognize that you probably have some love for the war god, and even if you didn't grow up in a church, the world that we live in, the principalities and the forces of darkness are that shadow aspect, that war god in shadow aspect, and all of its principalities and all of its aspects. Which is why when you leave a church, you get attacked by demonic forces and then you run back. That makes no sense. Because if the demonic forces were trying to get you to sin and keep you out of the church, then they wouldn't chase you back with scary feelings. You gotta understand that these things work on strategy, and those forces work on strategy, and they work on strategy with control and domination and conquering. And they have for a really long time worked in that way. And they conquer land and they hold it. Whether that land is the land that they have a house on, or that land is the body of their lover. That is now this is, you know, so there's something very like intense about this information that we're being brought through with home god, because home god is the god that you recognize as your home. And when you are brought up with your home god being a storm war god, then you really need to perpetuate argument, war, right over wrong, and control in order to keep that relationship going. But if we kind of step away from this notion of monotheism for just a second, because it's really important for us to think about the fact that the biological model of God, which is this is what I understand. Everything I understand about divinity comes from this notion of that the spirit realm is an ecosystem, that the fourth dimension is a part of the ecosystem that includes our ancestors that are enlightened beings, that are ascended masters that live amongst themselves in a world of ascended masters that are always in communication, channeling the deity field in positive attributes back into community on the third dimension. That's the light aspect. And the shadow aspect is what is working itself out. And the shadow aspect is not evil, it's what is working itself out. And if you're working stuff out, you're in shadow. If you're pulling in that light aspect, it's because you're moving into an enlightenment about a situation that otherwise had you in shadow. Had you feeling at some level powerless to it. What's in shadow? At some level powerless to it. You're working it out. And so how do we work it out? I mean, we have to do a whole reading on this concept of sin, because that's what that working it out business is all about. And sin, as co-opted and taken into the, you know, kingdom, this war god, storm god, uses it as a strategy, you know, in terms of control and holding, you know, land and what. But really what we're talking about is like, you enter into the shadow with, I am powerless to this problem, whatever it is. And that enlightenment and the divine intervention that brings that enlightenment, as you are now have more power, you're holding power over that which you were just powerless to. That's the movement, the technology of faith that you use. Whatever belief makes your placebo pill heal you will work. You know, this is like all of that infrastructure, you know, is really, really important. And so this notion of like, how do you now work with that in a way that, and I'm gonna let this go so long because it's just gonna do that. So I like have this little thing where I'm like, it's gonna be an hour, no one has the attention span, and I can't. I always go over that time. This King of Wands is a relationship that we're on, and this Moon card is something else, and I'm gonna get right into that. So this week, and I don't know if I just dropped the channel in an odd place, because I did kind of like move away from it. Like something happened and I kind of lost it a little bit, but here, I'm gonna come right back. You won't notice. I notice I need a break. Okay, I needed to take a break, so I don't know how much I'm chopping this up in terms of like flow, but I feel like when we enter where this Queen of Swords and the Sun card comes up, we're actually entering into a whole new way of explaining, but more at like a relational, individual level. So that background there in terms of like what the gods are and how you relate to them, you're already relating to them. You're relating to them through essences, through experiences within yourself, through expression. But how do you relate to them in terms of like, how do you find that container that can hold the story, that can give you the ability to believe into it and then transform your experience? Because we are talking about these technologies of faith that do work throughout all belief systems, and I can prove it. It works in the church sometimes, that somebody like this healing, this capacity for healing. People are miraculously healed in Catholic churches. They're miraculously healed in Protestant churches. They're miraculously healed in every belief system where there are spiritual practitioners that are communing with the divine. There are always avenues for relief. There are always avenues for worship. There are always avenues for the divine genius, including with art. So when we understand that we are naturally channels of energy. When we eat sugar, we are channeling that energy. We are bringing it into our body. We are experiencing it. We are expressing through it. When we have caffeine, same. Where we get into perilous territory is when we start to escape ourselves and lose ourselves and leave all of that room that is the wilderness of our body to energies that we're not intentionally carrying, and like when we abandon ourselves and we lose our experience because we're erased. Yeah, it's basically like you don't want to be taken over. You don't want to become Borg. You feel that. When you're in some kind of like a high control religion, you feel this numbness come in at a certain point. It's like a pleasant numbness where the sameness, and it doesn't feel like living. It doesn't feel like fully alive. And so then you transgress and you have this burst of what feels like life, but then only the guilt because there's this attachment to what feels like home, right? Home God. And so like trying to negotiate what this means more broadly and trying to sort of open your eyes, taking the scales off your eyes in order to see what it means for you to be in intimacy with yourself, and then in that being able to be intimate with God. You got to know yourself. You got to know the gods that are working through you, that are working with you, and that you are. And so there's almost like this battle that's constantly going on between your ancestral gods that are naturally expressing through you, their traits and the stories that they have to learn through and the experiences that they have to have and the lives that they have to, like expand through, and the story of a sameness that you're supposed to absolve all the complexity for in order to come into this controlled thing. So that thing is demonic. That's a demonic force, because that's not, and then we can get into what, like, demonic is such an annoying word, but that's a shadow aspect. That's something that is trying to consume you and the life and the experience and the growth and the expression of all of your traits through you, and what it means to create through that, and in that, trying to take that and make it into a sameness, into a stamp, into a soldier that serves and marches for the cause, and the ends justify the means, and everything that is lost in life, it is a sacrifice for the prize of the kingdom that is to come when you win the war. That is the story that you are living your entire life through, and it eats your life, and it takes all the other stories that you could be having and experiencing, and all the other energies that you could be refining and growing with. In true expression, actual praise is authentic expression, and authentic expression is an expression of power held responsibly. And sometimes, you know, that whole process of that authentic expression and holding power responsibly and being able to sort of like stand in your giftedness and wield what is a tremendous amount of power that you will only hold and only wield if you are holy. Because if you're not, those energies aren't going to expand in that way, and you'll be limited to bursts of anointing. Anointing is a technology of faith. It works a certain kind of way. And this could be proved. So when we look at this Queen of Swords and the Sun, we are talking about finding the gods that are your gods and are your goddesses. You have a divine feminine aspect of self and a divine masculine aspect of itself, and that has nothing to do with gender. But gender is a thing, but it has nothing to do with that, because we're talking about energies. We're talking about things at strictly energetic terms here. And everything that is created between, we're talking kaleidoscopic interactions between an energy that is agency and an energy that is reception. The energy that is receiving, that left side, that's the divine feminine aspect. That right side, that's the divine masculine aspect. We have both a right and a left, and they work in these things. This is the yin and the yang. Like, we can go on and on and on. Taking that and lying about it. And one aspect is community and one aspect is structure. Anyway, like I'm getting off track, but we have to have a relationship with the divine feminine aspect of ourselves, or else it's going to rebel. And we have to have a relationship with the divine masculine aspect of ourselves, or else it's going to rebel. How do these aspects rebel? In a way that is good for you, because it sort of like enforces you to deal with these aspects of yourself. Like, if you're not getting any of your emotional needs met and you're not able to express authentically, you're going to start to do so in secret, weird ways. It's going to show up. And so when we like have to enter into like figuring out who we are and who the gods within us are, like the first thing that we're looking at is what makes you you. What makes you you? What makes the authentic way that you express yourself? That's going to be like where your home guard, like where it is that your home gods kind of start. Now, there's something really unique that happened with me this week that I saw that I was like, damn it. Like I have always known about my ancestors on my mom's side and my ancestors on my dad's side. They don't like each other. They don't get along. We have war, we have angry, we have frustrated, we have like, and when it comes to their influence over their grandchildren, they war, you know, they're territorial. They you know, and me being very psychic my entire life, like I've always experienced this in a really weird way. And so, and to the extent that I like access what I consider to be the deity field, which is like, that's what I channel. That's is what I'm channeling, that plane. You know, those energies are so different from each other. Those are such different essences. And so when I was thinking about this concept of a home god and like what it meant to like be at home with, like what god is home for me, the first thing I had to think about is what people are home for me and what are the essences of those people who are home for me. Now, there's two people very particularly that are home for me. And it's interesting because one is my grandfather who died before I was born, who is like my spirit guide that I defer to. Like, that's the one, that's the trust, that is my like touchstone. Like my grandfather, my dad's father, you know, it's Grandpa Jimmy. I never met him in life. He died before I was born, but he's my he's home, he's God, right? In this certain kind of a way. Like when I think of essences and I think of like, what is the essence that I am at most home, that I am most safe, that I am most held, that I am most nurtured, and that I'm most powerful with. And it was the energy of my granddad, who I have like a perfect relationship with because that's my main spirit guide, and it was a relationship with my mom, who I have a very complicated relationship, almost a little bit of a difficult relationship in some ways with, but she's like these are the two energies that I feel the most affinity and that I feel the most like, that are the most of what makes me. There's a lot of my grandpa in me and there's a lot of my mom in me. And so when I thought about that, and I realized that like there are deities that I associate with those energies, whether they realize it or not, there are deities that I associate with those energies, because for some reason there's something to do with the way that we live our lives and the way that we choose to channel energy through our vessel, that we really do in our afterlife associate with some form of divinity that is related to our genes, our ancestral gods, and then that places us in the ecosystem of how we serve the whole. What kind of angel are you going to become is going to have to do with like how you behave in your life. Are you going to be a warrior ancestor who is a warrior angel who protects the generations to come? Well, were you a warrior in life? Were you operating in the light aspect of that archetype, or did you stay earthbound, stay fearful, stay defensive, stay conquering, and each time someone was born you tried to take over that person and now you're going to live your life through them? You know, it's like where we are and what we're influenced by and what we choose to express and what genes that we're carrying, that's the ancestors that are with you, that you choose to express through you, that you like align with. Again, this is how you find your home God. And like, what are you most, right? And so when I realized, because I've been hanging out with this energy of the god Lugh, that I am so much of that energy, and that's an energy that my grandpa holds and that he operates for in terms of his guardian, angel aspect with me. And then we have Hecate, who holds this ancient energy that is like this energy that I associate with my mother's immovable discipline occasionally, right? When she has a position, she's trying to teach me something, and she is mothering me in a certain kind of a way, and there is no wiggle room. I am not going to have a choice. I am going to obey this woman. You know what I mean? Like my mom, she's Greek, she has this energy, like when it comes to moving through liminal spaces, when it comes to helping people in the ways that she helps people. My mother has always helped the people that I would most choose to ignore. I'm not kidding. Like my mom is a very religious woman. She's a person who prays for people. She's a person who intercedes, and like she is very much a daughter of the war god to an extreme. And she operates in this way with that energy. So the war god that she serves, where she is out there trying to save people for that kingdom, she goes into the liminal spaces where no one ever cares about the people in those liminal spaces. Why are you helping that person? This is just going to, like, my mom's always been the person to like stop and help the person on the side of the road, like Good Samaritan kind of energy. And so she's always like very comfortable in liminal spaces. She's very comfortable being a light in dark spaces. She's very comfortable helping like people who are like lost, and so she does have that Hecate energy of fireflies in the eyes of the damned. She sees fireflies in the eyes of the damned. She looks at somebody who's damned and she sees their soul, and she sees that light, and she seeks to help them. She gives them that torch and she helps them see their way out of the labyrinth that they find themselves lost in. That's the energy of Hecate, and that's the energy of my mother. And so when I realized that those are the two energies that are most at work in my life, that are most how I communicate, most how I communicate with the energy of that warrior like Lugh all the time. I communicate with that energy of my mother helping people in a certain kind of way, that torch, that following the intuition, like all of that spiritual stuff that is very primordial often. And so I can kind of find where these deities are experienced in the people that I know and are experienced in me, knowing myself and knowing those outside of me where I see myself. I see versions of myself. I have this quality, I see that person, they have that quality. We're sharing a relationship with divinity in that quality. that is a god or a goddess that works with both of you. And when we talk about collective energies, we are talking about that our collective in particular is made up of extraordinarily ancient lineages. That's why we when I look at our collective, like I am met by the other world, like ancestors of antiquity, like high priestesses and gods and goddesses, like that archetypal field. And so it's actually pretty vast. It's like very gene pool, like expansive. And that's the world that we're in right now. That's all of us to a certain extent. And so what it means to find our way home, that Queen of Swords is that Hecate energy that I know so well and that I operate with and through, like in the light attribute so well, only because I had to enter at the shadow and get my butt kicked. There is entering at the shadow of Hecate. In the same way that you can enter at the shadow of the war god. And this is an interesting and important thing to explain, because the reason we have mythology, the reason that mythology is so important, and in book club we are going to start it on a mythology section, and we're also going to do our patron, very large reading that we do every so often. Whether or not you're in book club or not in book club, at the end of book club I like to do a reading on the book and just any questions from the stuff we learned from the book. But I also like to do a patron wide, like everybody who follows me, at the first level, the basic level. What the heck, seeker, I have to look at one of my things. But anyone who's everybody who's following at that level or whatever, I do a big group reading with the whole, with all 3 tiers. And I'm going to do that soon. I'm going to find a date for us and I'll let you know when that is. But we're moving into mythology. We went from individual archetypes into mythology. And the reason why mythology is so important is because it's our map. It's how we understand what it means to enter at the shadow and exit at the elevated place. We always encounter the counterfeit before we encounter the real. We always get the story somebody else told us before we get that foot of the cross moment, but my God, why have you forsaken me, when we're able to encounter the real beyond just the story that we're told. And so that's this whole movement that we're meant to go to. If we never get to that point, if we never ever get to that point, then it is a living death. And it is, I'm not going to get into it because Lou was like, why are you even? But what I'm seeing here that is so critical is that we understand the story. So when all of the libraries were burned, when every people was conquered, when all of the information were destroyed by this war god who set up an empire and supremacy and try to basically erase all indigenous people's stories and histories. We lost the point of mythology. We lost the technology of mythology, and we lost what mythology even does. We retained it with things like the Quran and the Bible and all forms of scripture. All forms of scripture are quite literally the technology of faith that allows people to move their belief through and into reality. And so everybody's belief systems work like this. But the importance and what it means to get in touch with who we are, and what it means to really know the home gods and how they operated and what it meant to enter at the shadow and eventually elevate and be at that ascended place, is to know where they came from. And so Jesus has sort of a story like this. But when we think about every time I encounter Yahweh, and I know Yahweh knows me. Yahweh is my mother's God. I grew up with Yahweh. We have a history, and we're not even at odds with each other. I get along with Yahweh. Who I don't get along with is Yahweh's shadow. I don't like Yahweh's shadow. I see Yahweh's shadow aspect in the form of Yaldabaoth everywhere I look, with the tyranny of temper tantrum toddler lunatics, espousing a whole bunch of Yaldabaoth crap. And my throat chakra is going because I'm getting angry and I'm a little bit off track. Hold on. I have to center at Lugh a little bit more because I don't want to get on the wrong place with this. So Yahweh is a Canaanite war god from that Canaanite pantheon. That's the history there. And it's a desert war god, and so it's a very interesting and it's a beautiful energy. it does well in the desert. You know what I mean? Like it's like a beautiful energy in a certain kind of way. You see it in as like as something so precious in so many ways, and very, very powerful as well. But in the shadow aspect, it operates as like the Yaldabaoth. And like if you think about the story of like Hercules, the story of Hercules is the rejected orphan. Yaldabaoth is the rejected orphan. The warrior king, the warrior god, always starts as the rejected orphan. That's the archetypal like arc. And so when you understand that the rejected orphan has a lot to work out between that point of like doing ends justify the means. If I have to burn down my whole village to get vengeance for being thrown out, I will. That's that level. Or like everyone has to be my slave because of vengeance, because they hurt me and now I'm king, blah, you know, or the people who hurt me are going to get punished, blah, you know, and that's all that Yaldabaoth stuff. You know, the ascended format of Yahweh, again, like when these things operate, you know, they had to break it up like this is a little bit complicated and difficult and not perfect. So I'm just doing the best I can with archetypal symbols. But everything has a shadow and it has a light. And so Hecate in the shadow is like staying in the labyrinth, staying in liminal spaces and never leaving them for fear of being anything other than assistance to others. That's one form of it that it can take. That's the way in which I got trapped. It's trying to be a savior in a way that is like not right? It's like I have to get it right because I don't want to like lead people wrong. Like you're always going to enter in the shadow of a deity. You're into that archetype. You're always going to enter at the shadow. So you have to, because that's how you know yourself, and you only know yourself at a certain level. So you always enter at a certain level, and then you advance through their teachings when they instruct you. So Hecate is about your power, getting in touch with your power, getting in touch with what it means to be your own sovereignty and your own compass and define your own way. And so she really like involves you in like getting to know yourself and like who you really are. And that's like a process. And so you're gonna, every deity that you work with is going to like put you through it to help you grow, but they're also going to be working with like what they know of you as themselves. And so it's a difficult process. And, you know, where we have Lugh is as the Sun card and the Queen of Swords as this energy of Hecate, which is again the guardian of the underworld. You know, she is the queen of the underworld. And you think about something like, you know, like the division of labor between the sexes over the course of the patriarchy. What we're looking at is a person who is stuck in a liminal space. She can't advance beyond mother and wife for a lot of history. You know, throughout the history of the patriarchy, there were like only several roles that she could have. So she is that Hecate energy in a lot of ways, where she does intense mothering and intense taking care of people to the exclusion of her own growth and her own well-being, and at a level of sacrifice. And so that's like where we enter her energy a lot of the time. But she will teach us very quickly that for if you're going to be that way in the world, then you are going to be honored, you are going to be respected, your boundaries are going to be minded. You know what I mean? She's going to have you holding your power in that position and not being like a self-annihilating slave, you know what I mean, without compensation. And so what it means though to sort of reconcile these parts of ourselves, you know, that energy of Lugh for me is like very hard to reconcile with that energy of Hecate, because that energy of Lugh is the warrior. That energy of Lugh is the craftsman. That energy of Lugh is interested in justice, and that energy of Lugh wants to create harvest. And there's this way in which each of us, like in reconciling with like what we're made of and working with this integration, like this thing that I saw that is so cool that I think is very Age of Aquarius, is this notion of weaving. So weaving is a type of magic, and weaving reality is a type of magic. And so whatever God is weaving reality, and like faith plus agreement equals reality. If everybody agrees on the story, it becomes a reality. So whatever archetypal story we all believe in and then we agree on, like it becomes what we operate through. And so we are having a changing of the guides, a changing of the guards, a changing of the gods. Like we're seeing that there's not going to be a need for the war god at the helm when we don't have a need for a war. The war god is going to transform into something else. Death and rebirth cycles. That's how it works. These are the cycles and the ways ways and the things and it does. That's how it works. And so when you look at this integration of the gods within, especially between divine feminine and divine masculine energies, I have to integrate my energy that is Lugh, which is like just such a, literally the moon and the sun. Like, we are talking about like very different energies. That's really difficult. And with this girl of wands being this page of wands and this king of wands, like, this is a journey, you know? And so the reason that the mythology is so important is because we have to understand where we are when we enter the need for a deity, like, or enter into a relationship with a deity. And the deities will often, if we are open to it, work with us in the same love and the same like exalted way that any other deity would work with us, because deities by their very nature are angels, for lack of a better way of putting it. What is an angel in sort of the Christian stories is one of the many, is Athena in the Greek mythology. You know, religious syncretism like is so important for us to sit down and learn what that means. And it doesn't mean that everything is the same and that everything can be condensed into sameness. It means that archetypes operate in a certain kind of way and they express in another kind of way, and understanding the interaction between those things is what it is to like fully be literate spiritually. And so when we think about why we need the story, is because we need to know where we're entering, knowing that you're a war god because you and that your origin story, if you are meant for that god, is always going to be in one way or another that you had to fight your way out. Then you're not so mad at the story of your life, because you're meant to come and express through it with that God and learn with that God and be that God's like living representation. And so you're not so mad that you've had to fight your way out, because suddenly you were created for it and with it. Now, we have a problem with the shadow aspect of the war god that has conquered all of the stories and all of the gods, and forcing people who aren't naturally its people to be its story. And now we have this horrible like mess on our hands because people aren't able to express the full range of divinity. They have to express one kind of divinity. It feels like a shoe that fits too small. Doesn't mean it doesn't get you someplace. It does. It doesn't mean that you don't have ecstaticism and you don't have it on you. Do. All of those technologies of faith work with all belief systems. But if a belief system, it fits like a shoe that is too small for you, that's not your home god. Because your home god should be something that feels expansive and that feels almost like you're too big, not too small. Because you're working with aspiration. That's very critical. And so, you know, for me to step into the like light aspect of Hecate is to not be a self-annihilating, self-sacrificing servant to like the kingdom of something where I think I need to be a soldier. Learning that is something that I learned with Hecate. What I learned about responsibly giving and responsibly operating in my giftedness and responsibly like being the vehicle of divinity that I am is how I now do things. And I feel empowered. I don't feel overwhelmed, disempowered, and crying because I'm drowning. That's the experience of what it used to feel like for me to help everybody that I knew. To be, you know, under 7 feet of water, always popping my head up and just being like, look at me, I'm so good. Oh my gosh, I'm a good person. You know, like it's nonsense, you know, like it was really, really weird. Like, and you know, instead of just like being present with people and being present with their pain in a way that wasn't, you know, about like treading water. And so that's why it was a bad fit, you know, for me to have just one form of divinity informing who I was or what it was to express with that and through that. So I needed to work with Hecate on this self-annihilating capacity and also on my lack of focus. These are two things that she brought me through to the other side of, and now I have that arsenal of skills associated with her light attributes, which are about leadership. Now I have to work on Lugh, because I have forgotten joy in a lot of ways. I have forgotten what it means to like feel like justice isn't a joke. You know, I have forgotten what it is to like feel like the like plenty of like a harvest, you know what I mean? I work really hard and like whatever I don't, you know, like there's a way in which like I've just been in this energy with Hecate for far too long, and now I'm moving out of it. Do I not love her as a goddess? No, I do, but I don't need that anymore. I've learned that lesson. I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to move into this part of me that is more that light, bright sun energy of Lugh, and know that part of myself. And so like when we're trying to work with deities, and like how long will I work with Lugh? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like this collective, there's a lot of you that are on this journey in this way, that have been in the liminal space of Hecate for just too long. You know, and it's and Hecate is many things, and she is actually she works in shadows. And so this is going to be like working in shadow. And so what is it to bring balance and light to these aspects of self? And what is it to work with these traits and expand them from a place of overwhelm and confusion into a muscle that is strong? Because it's a muscle. These are traits that are muscles, and they're either weak because you're using only 4 muscles for the purpose of someone else's story, or your entire body is strong because you're interacting with all that is you and all that expresses through you, and you are strong in all of the different areas where you are influenced by divinity as divinity. And your particular experience, your unique experience, does not get lost. I'm seeing that film reel again. You know, when we think about that film reel, the light that shines through it, that is what infuses you with the light. That's like the God energy, is like that light that shines through you. That's the divine masculine energy. That's your opinions, your thoughts, your individual vantage point through like that lights. The film reel that the light is shining through is going to be your ascended ancestors, all the deities that you are influenced by that color your expression. Then what is playing itself out on the screen is like your life. And how you interpret it is a combination of all of those things in one way or another. And so when we understand the self in that way, when we understand that divinity, that light that shines through, that life, that's God force, that's divine masculine energy, that film reel, all of our traits, all of our capacities, all of our essences, everything working itself out in terms of our expression, that's divine feminine energy. Receptive, it's part of you, it's there, it's right before you, it's what you're using, it's your sense of humor, you just have it. But it comes from all of your ancestors. That's the film reel. Picture it playing itself out, life, your perspective on that story. Is it a sad story? Is it a happy story? Is it what are you working out? What did you come in with? Are you doing drama? Are you doing comedy? Are you doing action adventure? I hope not. I did that. I wish I did not do that one. We all come in with a story that whether we like it or not, we're living through it. And those deities that we work with and work through us and we experience are associated with the kind of story that we're in. And so the reason why I like this, Lugh is also a warrior god, and Lugh is also a savior god. And Lugh is the way that savior and warrior expresses through me, through my origin of my genes, through the land that I came from. And so me being in touch with this energy of Lugh is also being in touch with my power and how my power operates and expresses. And being able to refine that is what it means to be in relationship with that God within myself, but also as I identify that God outside of myself. And that God outside of myself is expressing through other people who bring that energy into the world and then express that energy. There are people that have the same sense of humor as I am. There are collectives of people working out similar stories who are part of similar efforts spiritually when we came in with a game plan. And so it's not like there's some like wrong or right, oh my God, evil, not evil. Ugh, that's never it. That's so reductive. That's not what we're dealing with. Like what we're dealing with is praise is authentic expression. That's what it is. And everybody has a different form of that. And so, you know, are there people operating in the shadow aspects of deity fields doing horrible things? 100% all the time. But those deities are responsible for whipping those people into shape and showing them the right way home, wherever their home ends up being, whatever that home God ends up being. There's so many ways in which we can come to our home God, the God that is the emanation of our soul. So many ways that it can express, so many ways that we can find it, so many ways that we can identify it in the stories that are given to us, that we then grow through and then have a relationship with that energy through those stories. The story is just the container that you put the faith in. And so if you can't relate to the stories that you were told as a kid anymore because of all this church hurt or whatever else it ends up being, divinity has a story that will the placebo pill heals because someone believes the story about it. So whatever created you like that. That's the genius of what created you. And that's the genius of what created you, providing the technology to heal through what works for you, in what way. And it's either what's given to you or what you find or what finds you. But it's all divinity working for you. It's all the universe on your side. It's all the thumbprint of God expressing itself over and over and over again in a fractal system that is endless. And you are a unique co-creation with different elements of the cosmos. Yes, we are from Earth and outer space, but these are dimensions and they operate as dimensions in a dimensional way. And there's a lot going on here that is not doomed. Hecate, it shows up in the story of Sophia, where she keeps Sophia in these dimensions of crappiness, learning a lesson for quite some time before Jesus, I think it is, shows up and delivers her. And that is so perfectly the story of like what it means to be in the shadow aspect of Hecate energy, like disciplined as AF, dealing with these lower energies giving you a hard time because you're having to find your power. You're having to call to every power that you can think of for the help that you need in order to get that deliverance until you find that truth that's going to set you free. It is a process. It is a sorting process, and it is dealing with what feels like I am overpowered, what feels like I am stuck, what feels like I am trapped, and calling out over and over again, where is God going to answer me from? From what place? How can I get the help that I need? How can I meet my Savior? Where is that? The energy of Hecate in that story isn't there to confine Sophia. The Hecate of that story is there to be transcended by Sophia, because Sophia needs to understand like a very crucial thing. And so when we understand the story and how the story operates and what these energies are actually doing in those stories, when we understand that these stories are the symbolic language that we are given, that we're channeling through, when we're in the ancients sitting around the fire before the written word, telling the story of Job, channeling through this information about the war god and perseverance and what it means to find yourself in that story with that God's influence. This is what we're doing. This is what channeling is. This is what an oracle does. And so, this healer here in this bigger picture with that King of Gods, right? That King of Gods, that's a really interesting way in which Lugh placed that. The King of Wands is the warrior god. So the King of Gods is somehow a leader. But the King of Gods shows up in all sorts of forms, as the divine masculine aspect of God is represented on the earth. But the moon, the divine feminine aspect of God represented on the earth, also shows up in many forms. And we are having to work out these energies within ourselves and good relationship with these energies within ourselves. And that's as simple as saying you need to know how to receive. You need to learn how to receive. You need to be able to receive. Otherwise, you are going to die of a type of soul deprivation that you are rolling through life with. That is the truth for everybody. You have to heal the divine masculine aspect of yourself. You have to be healing the part of yourself that goes out and gets it, that has a plan, sets a plan, and makes it happen. You have to have a relationship with that aspect of your energy. So we have to work this stuff out within ourselves. And the way that we do that is often by working that stuff out with others, working that stuff out within themselves. And so we do need a healed relationship between the divine feminine and the divine aspect of God, the divine feminine aspect of God and the divine masculine aspect of God. Why do we know that we need healing between the divine feminine aspect of God and the divine masculine aspect of God? Why do we know that that needs healing? Because look at the world. What is being expressed? What is the shadow of the fourth dimension showing us in panoramic view on a big screen is a disconnect that we are obviously witnessing. This argument is happening between souls embodying different gods and goddesses, like expressing this frustration and trying to work from the shadow aspect of subjugation. into the light aspect of cooperation and operating in our areas of giftedness in harmony within ourselves and with each other. And that's what we do when we hang and when we do this. That's what we do when we pray. That's what we do when we work with the deities. We are working on these different aspects of ourselves. I need to work with a masculine energy right now because I've been too heavily in this liminal space, and I need to work with what it means to have agency, what it means to step back into that vitality. And that doesn't mean abandoning my femininity. It's the opposite. It means my femininity can begin to express itself more comfortably because the divine masculine aspect of myself has taken care of business. And I feel comfortable to be vulnerable because I've got everything taken care of for myself. So that divine feminine aspect of myself can express itself and can be in a place of reception and receiving, because I'm not on the defensive every single minute because things are out of whack. So it's like we got to work on this stuff within ourselves, but that also means that like we find the deity that is going to help us because that's what they represent. And the reason why there are pantheons is the same reason why each organ in your body does a different thing. And so sometimes we have to call on the goddess of compassion because we don't have any compassion in our lives and we're going to die of lack of compassion. Sometimes we have to call on the god of war because we need to show up and defend ourselves. Sometimes we have to call on Hecate because we are lost and we don't know where we're going and we need someone to show us the way. That's why these stories exist. And they were always operational as for technologies of faith that allow you to place your belief so that it can manifest as your reward, so that you can be provided for. That instincts that animals have that gives them all of the provision that they're ever going to have in a lifetime is what you have at a psychic level with those aspects of divinity that created you over a long period of time, that are your support system, that express with you and through you. And if you understood what you were in the way of a channel, when you drink caffeine, you're channeling it. That's not erasing you. The concept of possession is an empirical, nonsense. Yes, it happens, but not in the way that people think. And when people lose themselves to that stuff, there's so much to talk about. I could do so many things with that. And we're gonna look at sin, possession, and all the scary stuff in the next reading. But this reading is really about what is this notion of this Page of Cups? How do you receive from divinity? How do you connect with the different deities and not get hurt? Well, you're always going to enter at the shadow of where you are. So you're always going to have a series of experiences that are going to show you what is real divinity, what is real God, and what is counterfeit, what is not it. And that's why people, are always looking for the right, And this Three of Cups is community, finding our way in community and removing this energy of tyranny over how we relate, what it means to relate. Oh my gosh, right or wrong, the war god has that mind, judgment, strategy, defense or assimilation, rejection, all that stuff is that's war god mindset. So if you want to refine the war god stuff and stay in that's your home god, that's good for you, that's fine. It's a god, it's a deity. They're not out to hurt you, they're out to teach you, and they're going to teach you something. They're going to get you there one way or another. But if you're in the shadow aspect or shadow attribute of that war god, you're afraid to experience anything but obedience and punishment, and that cycle around scanning for whether or not you're being obedient or punishing, scanning whether or not somebody else is obedient or punishment, scanning safe or not safe. So you have to understand that you're always holding that energy, that you're channeling it through, that it's operating as you're operating as the divine aspect of God that is that God in the world. If you want to step out of that and work with other energies, there's nothing wrong with it. It's going to make you a more rounded person. These energies aren't evil. They're not out to get you. The universe is on your side. You are loved. You are protected. And when people do lose themselves to substances, whether that substance is the shadow aspect of a deity, a demonic force, or that substance is heroin. People do abandon themselves and they are no longer there. And then all you're looking at is the substance of a demon. Like, supremacy is something that people hold and they lose themselves, and all they're walking around with is supremacy at a certain point, and that's all that they are in the world. That's a good example. And also substances that people lose themselves to, where all somebody is an expression of how that drug operates. That's possession, but that happens anywhere with anything if you're abandoning yourself. So when we see that vacancy, it's terrifying, and that can be correlated with sin, and we can talk about what that means. But ultimately, if you're channeling divinity, you're probably entering at some point where you don't understand the divinity that you're channeling, and that divinity will avail itself to you in relationship with you, strengthening that aspect of yourself that is them, and that aspect of themselves that is them, because that is what parents do. And it's a little bit more complicated with us because we have a lot of influences of a lot of different energies, and we've been taught supremacy. And supremacy that only works like in this limited, like masculine sort of way. It's masculine magic. It works like very limited in a forceful way, and it has to be maintained, and it dissipates. It's like a very difficult type of working with energy to do. It's toiling with this 9 of Wands. It's toiling. So if you want to stop toiling, if you want some of that provision, there's no prosperity gospel. It's just about refining yourself with the parentage, with the energies that can make you a powerhouse of these qualities and these traits, and bring them into the world at a near divine level, channeling that divine genius and that divine energy. It supports you. I'm a good example of that. And it will, so you can do that. You can operate in your area of giftedness. You can refine your traits. You can refine your abilities with divinity in such a way that it becomes almost like superhuman strengths. We've always had this capacity, and it is relational. And how we find these energies is, first we have to understand that we've been occupied land, occupied territory, serving a foreign god who has enslaved us into a soldier, mercenary type of mentality. That god has counterparts in every part of the world. There is a warrior god, there is a war god for every peoples. You can find the light attribute through your unique way of expressing and participating with that energy. And it's possible that you don't have a lot of the war god in you, and therefore you feel more comfortable with something like love goddesses, depending on how you orient with your particular set of traits and your concentration of skills and values and goddess-given abilities to bring into the world with you, to represent what divinity is as it's expressed. It's cool. It's good news. And there isn't really, it's like there's no supremacy of traits. Think about your body. You're in a body. And within that body, it's teeming with life. It's an ecosystem. And it's different life types of life, doing different life things. Everything has a job, and they're all very different. Your heart is very different from your mitochondria, and different planes of existence. And your essence, the energy that they all respond to as divinity is you. And I think I lost the channel there. What was Lugh? Where did that go? Changing in form. Up. So he's saying, I somehow lost it. I guess it wasn't supposed to come through. I saw something. I saw like this cool vision, and it just kind of just poop, gone. Like, what happened? So this healing that needs to come through, I just caught a lot of interference, and that happens, especially like where I'm located. And it's just, again, like we do have magic, we do have abilities. When we think about like what it is to connect with all these technologies of faith, there's a shadow aspect to how people use technologies of faith too. Soulish prayers are your cursing people, when it's your agenda. In the name of my agenda and my supremacy, I bind and hurt you. That's all like channeling a shadow aspect of like Yaldabaoth into the world and like aiming it at somebody. It's not not effective. 3 minutes, like tops, that energy exists, and then it dissipates, it poofs, because it's not a creative force. It's using whatever creativity you had siphoning from you. And like, it's a kind of like, once you start cursing people, you curse yourself. It's inevitable. And this is retroactive. So it can affect your entire life backwards. It's a very strange thing. So what I'm seeing here, like when I talk about this, is that, you know, there are what seem like competing energies at the shadow aspect of the ecosystem, you know, and in the same way you have like parts of you that are like unhealed. There are parts of the whole that operate in an unhealed way that are like seeking to be healed. And because I can't catch this, I'm really having a trouble with getting this channel back. I'm going to stop, and then, you know, I think I'm going to leave it at a cliffhanger for some weird reason. Oh, changing in form. Oh, okay. So basically, okay, so you have the part of you that is a warrior comes from the part of you that is a warrior that like goes all the way back to your ancestors who were warriors, and you carry that expression of warrior with you. So, you know, me finding Lugh as like that place is bringing in that divine masculine aspect, and I can't get the channel has closed. I can't do it. I don't know why. I'll come back. You know, this is it's all alchemy. You know, it's all this like I just do not like that energy at all, and I don't want to try and channel through it. I'm going to just clean it up. But I'm going to end it. This is probably a good place to end anyway, because we are talking about healing. We are talking about being empowered. We are talking about moving through like the confusion. The energies that are negative, that are destructive, are always going to try and find people to channel through and siphon power from and move an agenda forward with. They're always going to be in a war. And anybody that, you know, operates in other areas of giftedness and other areas of expression, we've seen this conquering energy come through and take entire indigenous populations off of their home that they live in and kill their entire families and just wipe them out. Like, we know the energy and what it does and how it operates. It's only as powerful as you agree that it is. And that's kind of a tricky thing that we're going to get into when we start to talk about how that all shakes out. So like, we're going to leave it here because it's a good place to leave it, because then we're going to talk about what it means to actually hold power. And not misuse power. So to actually hold power, which is what I'm about to go do right now, and not misuse power, it is to be like operating at the in the light attribute of the deities that you work with, and the light attribute of the deity that you work with, And so I'm going to talk about what sin is. I'm going to talk about what possession is, but I'm going to do that next week, because that's an interesting thing, and that's actually like what I'm looking at right now, the vision I'm seeing right now. It's like that possession, the people that are possessed like of this energy, and it's really ugly and it's really sad, and it's actually like one of the most destructive things that I've ever actually looked at. And so I'm going to go and like go into some energy work and alleviate that, and I'm going to leave this here. But like, what it means to be a healer is to understand that like nothing's really against you. Divine guidance is for you. And since the beginning of time, people have been doing just what I'm doing, only they were sitting around a fire and they were channeling in those divine energies, and they were speaking with the gods that created them about what it meant to develop, what it meant to form like ethics and morals, and what it meant to organize in tribes, and what it meant to be healthy in those relationships. So we're going to come back to that, and I'm going to work with this energy of Lugh right now. And just send you off with lots of love, and I hope that your week is really good. This did get so long. I think we're at like the 2-hour point, so it's actually perfect. And yeah, let's leave that there. And if you've got questions or thoughts, please share them, because I'm learning from this as much as you all are learning from this, and every time you say something, I learn something new. So I love that. So let's keep up the conversation, and I will see you all again soon. We'll come in with the savior story with Lugh, and we'll also come in with this notion of like what opposition even is, because it's mostly farts in the wind, but I'll explain that when we come back. So I'll see you again next week, and I hope you have a really, really good week, and I will announce the date of whenever that group reading is. So let's leave it there.